Some people say, were you influenced by Sergeant Pepper? And I can honestly say I don't think we were, because in fact we walked in for our very first session into Abbey Road, where we encountered exactly the same engineers who'd almost the previous day been working on the Beatles album as Sergeant Pepper as the Beatles were walking out.
We were picking up tambourines and acoustic instruments.
And mellotrons.
But the thing is, the mellotron was left behind. That's what I was going to get to.
Sorry.
And the Odessey Oracle, it's got so much mellotron on it. May not have never been on there, except the Beatles left a mellotron behind.
Yeah.
And so I think Rod started playing it one day.
Yeah.
Yeah, this sounds good.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, that was great.
Well, I think with Odessey and Oracle, I think that you can see the progression in the writers. The two dominant writers in the Zombies were Rod Argent, who's sitting right here, and Chris White, who is not sitting here. And they're the two dominant writers. And I honestly think you can see progression in their writing, especially Chris. And then suddenly you arrive at this album, Odessey and Oracle, and there are just 12 complete classic tracks. I think it was just them growing as writers. We had 3 years on the road playing solidly all around the world. It was a real education, and I think you can hear it in their writing. And to me, that's where Odessey and Oracle is different. It's just that both the writers just came to a really wonderful place in their writing careers.
In my songs, I'd always written the bass line as being integral to the song. So, for instance, on She's Not There, the bass line was written as part of the song. Even on Odessey and Oracle and things like Carousel 44, the bass line was actually written as part of the song. It wasn't something that was just come up with at rehearsal. I think, so I'd always wanted to do that, but I think seeing the way that Brian Wilson had developed those sort of singing bass lines, and McCartney had too, that definitely was in the soup that was around and that I was drinking from at the time, you know. And so I would say that I can remember those sort of influences that people sometimes mention.
One point of interest, the American CBS have gone to town on Butcher's Tale, releasing it within a week.
Okay, so
that's too gory for Britain.
Yeah, so that was the very first release in America was Butcher's Tale. So that must have been just as it was coming out in America. Yeah, so it would already have been out here for a few months, possibly. Yeah. By that time.
In America, they eventually released about 3 or 4 singles, and the last single they released was Time of the Season. And somehow, so the story goes, there was one DJ in Boise, Idaho, who would not stop playing it.
Yeah.
It was as simple as that. And it went from that one DJ to being a huge hit, #1 in Cashbox, #2 in Billboard. And it was a wonderful surprise. I've never seen that lesson before. But obviously, I think Chris was probably very excited about Butcher's Tale being released as a single, because Chris wrote that song. So.
Great song, but I mean, never a single in a million years. It's a crazy choice. There are 2 John Peel sessions that I particularly remember playing on. One was with, I think it was the first time the Faces played with John, and we were, I mean, I don't know who was supporting who, but we were certainly either co-headlining or probably headlining at that time with the Faces, which, as is well known, he absolutely fell in love with them. And he did on that session, he absolutely fell in love with Rod and the Faces. I remember very well playing that session. But another session I remember was with Egg. He played with a band called Egg. And the keyboard player in that band is Dave Stewart. Now, Dave Stewart had a top 5 single with Colin singing, which is the Jimmy Ruffin song, What Becomes of the Broken Hearted. So that connection I remember, and I remember those 2 sessions very well. Do you know what? If someone were to ask us, was there a band that we particularly looked at as rivals, or or that we were sort of locking horns with. Do you know what? Colin may have a different idea on this, but I don't think there was, because I think, in a way, I don't think anyone else was playing quite what we were playing.
I know some bands used to get really worked up about where they were in the charts, but we were never like that. But we looked up to the Beatles. The Beatles were the band. And of course, all British bands have got a great debt to pay to them, because they opened the doors of the world to British bands. British bands didn't travel that much abroad before the Beatles. Once the Beatles happened, the world was our oyster. I mean, we were straight away over to the States, but we went to the Far East and we went all over Europe. So the Beatles were our huge inspiration.
And I always feel that they were the first real progressive band, in the sense that they were the band that started pushing musical boundaries. And that, to me, is what progressive music really is all about. They started making anything possible, and in a creative way, just widen the horizons of everybody, really. And I think people like the Stones had a huge debt to pay to the Beatles. I think almost every band that was around did, actually. Who is Emily? Rose for Emily. Okay. I decided we were still so young. I was still living at home, and I remember my mum and dad had an old piano. My dad was a pianist. He was a semi-pro pianist. Had his own dance band from the age of 17 to the age of 83. And I remember coming down one morning and thinking, I've got to write a song today. So I went to the piano really quite early in the day and thought, where am I going to start? And I remember thinking, do you know what? I've just read a short story by William Faulkner called A Rose for Emily. Now, I just thought that was a phrase which really tripped off the tongue and was a good starting point for a story of my own. The story of the song doesn't bear any relationship to the William Faulkner story at all. But I just thought it was an evocative title, and I just wanted to spin something out of those Rose for Emily, those 4 words. And that's what I did. I started with the first line, you know, though summer is here at last, the sky is overcast, and I literally just took it from there and let it tell itself.